helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counselling Services.
Hi, I'm Michael Hart, Director of Elim Counselling Services, and I want to thank you for listening to this edition of Life Transformation. We're a Christian counseling radio show where chains are broken and lives are transformed. If you're not familiar with Elim Counselling Services, you can find out more about us at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M as in man, counseling with two L's. And we can also be contacted by phone at 613-699-1677. And today we have another interesting show lined up for you. And today we'll be talking about living with a paranoid spouse. Maybe you're in a relationship where you're always being suspected of doing something that is wrong. So if that's the case, then you want to listen to this show because it will be dealing with that topic, living with a paranoid spouse. And as usual, with me in studio today is Melissa Waga. Thank you very much for being here again, Melissa.
It's good to be back. So as you said off the top there, we're going to be talking about living with a paranoid spouse. And one of the things you've highlighted is sometimes people in these situations actually are experiencing something called a paranoid personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And honestly, prior to talking to you about this show, I'd never heard this term before. Mm-hmm. So you mind explaining a little bit about what is paranoid personality disorder?
Paranoid personality disorder is actually one of the mental illnesses that listed in the DSM-5. For those of you who are not familiar with the DSM-5, it's sort of like the Bible of mental illnesses that lists the different illnesses and the criteria for diagnosing someone with these illnesses. So according to the DSM-5, paranoid personality disorder is a pervasive distrust and suspiciousness of others, such that their motives are interpreted as being malevolent, and this begins in early adulthood and continues in and shows itself in a variety of contexts. So from this brief definition, we are seeing that it is something that is pervasive. In other words, it's not just in an isolated situation relating to just a spouse, but in many cases it's with friends, it's with colleagues. So it affects the person exhibits this sort of behavior in a number of different arenas of their lives.
And are there specific symptoms seen with this paranoid personality disorder?
Yeah, there are a number of different symptoms that are listed in the DSM-5. So the first one is that the person suspects without sufficient basis that others are exploiting, harming, or deceiving him or her. Two is that the person is preoccupied with unjustified doubts about the loyalty or trustworthiness of friends or associates. And three is reluctance to confide in others because of unwarranted fear that the information will be used maliciously against him or her. Four says that the person reads hidden demeaning or threatening meanings into benign remarks or events. 5 is that the person persistently bears grudges, that is unforgiving of insults, injuries, or slights. 6, the person perceives attacks on his or her character or reputation that are not apparent to others and is quick to react angrily or to counterattack. And the 7th symptom listed in the DSM-5 is that the person has recurrent suspicions without justification regarding fidelity of spouse or sexual partner. So this is what brings us into the avenue of relationships where living with a paranoid spouse, you're often suspected of having an affair or doing something that, sneaking around behind the person's back. You're always suspected of being unfaithful. So I just want to read here an email that sort of captures some of what is mentioned here in the DSM-5. And it's an email that I got from woman who was really, really very anxious, and I have changed some of the details here for confidentiality so that the person could not be identified. So the email goes as follows. It says, let me just get to the beginning of it here. The person says, I am at my wit's end living with my spouse. I am at the point where even though I don't believe in divorce, I think I have no choice but to leave my husband. We have been married 5 years, and after a fantastic honeymoon, my life has turned into a living nightmare filled with accusations and dangers. My husband has become suspicious of everything and everyone. It is so bad that I am having panic attacks when I think of going to church with him. He believes that the people at our church are all talking about him and is plotting against him, and interprets simple greetings or looks from others in the congregation as proof that they dislike him. 3 years ago, we hosted a missionary at our home who was the guest speaker at our church. And my husband has since then accused me of sleeping with this missionary and is convinced that the affair is still going on. What seems so frustrating about the whole thing is he takes harmless events and twists them to suit his interpretation. He believes I had an affair with the missionary because we were both out of the house and happened to arrive home within 2 minutes of each other. He sees this as proof that we were together, and nothing I can say or do will convince him otherwise. He believes that we are still in touch with each other because he answered the phone recently and a male voice said, "Wrong number." Out of frustration, even though I was embarrassed, I got a friend of mine whose house I was at that day, the missionary, and I came home within 2 minutes of each other to call him and let him know that I was with her. But he now hates this friend because he says she knows about the affair and is helping me cover up my sins. I have suggested that we do counseling several times, but he refuses, often saying I'm a pathological liar and I need only to confess my sins. Frustrated, I turned to our pastor for help, but this only made matters worse. After hearing his grounds for believing I had an affair, the pastor lovingly said to him that he didn't have sufficient ground to suspect me of having an affair and suggested that we do counseling. Since then, he is mad at the pastor, believing that the pastor is in on the deception and is threatening to report the pastor to the head of the denomination. I need your help because I can't take this anymore.
That's quite the letter of desperation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think as you described in terms of this disorder, you can really see how this paranoid feelings of this husband are constant. Mm-hmm, and it's not a one-time event. It's in every aspect of their relationship.
Yes, absolutely. It's at church. It's at home. It's with our friends. It's just taking over this person's life. And you can also see the different symptoms of the listed in the DSM-4 being manifested here. And one of the first symptoms I mentioned earlier is suspects without sufficient basis that others are exploiting, harming, or deceiving him or her. So you can see from how this person is interpreting situation that there is not enough grounds. Mm-hmm. The evidence for the affair is just that this person came home within 2 minutes of the missionary that was staying at their house. So just because of that coincidence, yes, this is proof. Mm-hmm. My wife was out together with this person and they're doing something behind my back. So this makes it very frustrating to live with people who are paranoid like that because they don't need grounds for their accusations.
And you also see the different things where the loyalty and trustworthiness of friends and associates, whether it's her friend trying to give her side and give some grounds that, no, this didn't happen, or the pastor, and now suddenly you don't trust them either. And so I think the listeners probably heard in you reading that, as I did, the desperation in this woman's writing. So if someone's out there listening and they see maybe their situation echoed in the words of this woman, what advice would you give to someone who's on the receiving end of these kind of suspicions? from a paranoid partner? Because it seems kind of hopeless in this case, because all the evidence she gives seems for naught, and
Right.
it's getting her nowhere. So what advice would you give?
Well, I guess you can see from the email that this person sent that the more she tried to prove that she wasn't having an affair, the more it created proof for the person that there was a conspiracy against him, for her husband, that there was a conspiracy against him. She tried the friend, and the friend was in on the cover-up. She tried the pastor, and the pastor also knows about it. So it's important to realize here that you're dealing with someone who has a mental illness, and there is nothing that you are going to do that is going to prove to that person that you're not having their fear. So if you're living with someone and you can say, yes, I can see many of these symptoms in that you have listed, the 7 symptoms, I can see many of these symptoms in my partner, in my spouse, then I would say that this is probably proof that you're dealing with someone with a mental illness. This is not meant to be a diagnosis in any way, because there are other things that you'd have to do to diagnose someone with paranoid personality disorder. But just to say that these are usually symptoms that there is something that's going on that's not quite right. So first of all, if you're living with someone and you're always being suspected, and it's pervasive that people at church feels that people at church is against them, that your in-laws is also against them, that people at work is conspiring against them, then the first thing I would say is begin to suspect that there is something that is mentally wrong in this situation, and that maybe help is needed to deal with this situation, because there is no amount of proof that you're going to come up with that is going to make this person satisfied. I had a case some years ago, and I'm changing some of the details as well, where this person was really suspected that your spouse was having an affair because this person was in the army and was posted outside of Ottawa. So it was the wife in this case, what she did was to pay a private investigator to follow this person around, because she was convinced that this person was having an affair, and she had things that she would say, these are signs. And after about a month of following her husband around, the private investigator came back and said, I followed him to where he's posted. There is nothing going on. He's not having an affair. He's actually at work, and he's working very hard. And even this was not proof to the person. She became mad at the private investigator and believed that he was not doing a good enough job, because if he was doing his job properly, he would have discovered that her husband was having an affair. So this is how difficult it is. The harder you try, the more turmoil you're going to find yourself in. So what I would suggest to people who are going through that difficulty in their relationship is that don't try to prove to this person that you are not. You deny the accusations. Deny the accusations and lovingly say to the person to him or her, that I would never do such a thing to you. The second thing I would say is refuse to become frustrated and to be drawn into arguments.
I can sense that being difficult, though.
Yes.
Because honestly, just hearing you describe that woman's situation,
Yes.
I am frustrated for her. So when you're in the thick of it,
Yes.
how do you not become frustrated?
And this is where I would say that if you're in a situation like that, you might need help from a professional to be able to deal with the spouse, because it's not easy to have someone accuse you and to be in a situation where this person is always talking about others, being against them without becoming frustrated. But I think with the right kind of help, you can get to understand that, number one, that this person is ill. And that, number two, getting into an argument with this person or defending yourself and becoming angry at this person is to no avail, because the more you deny and the more you become frustrated, it's the more this person is is convinced that
like
there
fuel
is
almost,
it's fuel to the fire. So I would say get help if necessary if you're finding it difficult to avoid argument. But the worst thing that you can do, and some of my clients before coming in have actually falling into the trap of confessing for the sake of getting it over with. That's the worst thing that you could do. So some people will say, well, just for the sake of peace, just to get this thing off my back. If it's something not as big as an affair, they might say, yes, I did this, just so that they can move on. But if you give in that one situation, even if it's a minute thing in your opinion, then what is going to happen? The paranoid person is going to use that as proof to say that you're unfaithful and you cannot be trusted. So it's really a very, very difficult situation. If you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services. And with me in studio today is Melissa Waggett, and today we're discussing the topic of living with a paranoid spouse, living with someone who is paranoid. And if you're not familiar with Elim Counseling Services, you can find out more about us at Elim, E-L-I-M as in man, counseling with 2 L's ministry.com. That's elimcounselingministry.com. And we can be reached by phone at 613-699-1677.
So, Michael, you were just describing some strategies a spouse can take on if they're living with someone who has this paranoid personality. And you said to deny the accusations, refuse to become frustrated, and engage in arguments. Is there anything else a spouse can do?
Well, I think where this is concerned, I think to add to that, or to sort of reiterate what I said earlier, it's very important to recognize that the person is mentally ill. And so the more you try to show proof or to convince, it's the more things are going to get worse. So I would say if you can recognize that, then I think this is probably one of the things that is going to help you not to become frustrated. In the same way, if you're dealing with someone who is schizophrenic, and you can realize that person is thinking that they're hearing voices and they're hearing me say things that I'm not saying. A lot of people in those kind of situations can get to a place where they do not take it personally. But what makes it difficult with paranoid personality disorder for spouses to understand that it's a mental illness is that many of the other symptoms of psychosis are not present in paranoid personality disorder. These people are highly functioning people who hold on very good jobs and doesn't have any symptoms of the other kinds of delusions or hallucination, which are hallmarks of other personality disorders. So this makes it hard for spouses to understand that the person is mentally ill. But it's very important that the spouse who is on the receiving end keep this in mind. And so you have asked, what else could the spouse do in that situation? I think it's very important to surround yourself with good support. People who can be there to support you and can understand what's going on in your household and can help you to deal with the situation in a way that you don't fall apart, because this kind of situation is very draining and will wear away at you. You can hear from the email that I read earlier that this person had her wit's end. She was actually thinking, help, saying help, I don't know what to do. So you need to surround yourself with people who can provide you with good support.
So we gave the email example earlier in the show. Are there any examples seen in the Bible of people who've experienced or are suffering from a paranoid personality disorder? I
don't think there is a scripture as such of someone suffering from what could clinically be described as a paranoid personality disorder, but we do see evidence of paranoia in the Bible, and I think a good example of that would be King Saul, who became paranoid that David was trying to overthrow him and was trying to take his throne. And he became so convinced of this that he felt that he had to kill David, who was very loyal to him, that he had to kill David to get to protect his kingdom. So in the story, in the narrative in First Kings, we see also that there wasn't sufficient basis for him to come to this conclusion, which is one of the criteria for being diagnosed with paranoid personality disorder. Because the narrative reads that Saul came to that conclusion because the people, there was a victory over the Philistines, and the women were singing that Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. So they were just singing a song of praise to both King Saul, and to David. And King Saul, from there say, now because of that, what's left but for him to take my kingdom? And it was after that the Bible said, like, it was an evil spirit that entered Saul, and his kingdom, he ended up losing his kingdom because of this paranoia that he was going to lose his kingdom. So this brings me to my next point, that people who have paranoid personality disorder, they actually end up creating the very things that they're paranoid about. So someone who is paranoid about their spouse having an affair, their behavior towards the spouse may actually end up driving the person to someone else. Or someone who is paranoid that everyone at church is against them may actually turn the whole congregation against them because of how they're acting towards people within that congregation.
So what causes people to get to these states of paranoia?
There is no known cause for paranoia. There's nothing that psychologists have come up with that they could say that this is what is the root cause of paranoia. But there is some evidence that it might be hereditary from twin studies that have been done, and also from examining family genealogy, where they find that people who have schizophrenia, people who are schizophrenic within their family, a family member that is schizophrenic could also end up having could develop paranoid personality disorder, but there is no known cause for the disorder. It's also believed by some psychologists that there might be some kind of what you should call some kind of family effects, that it can be learned from the influence in families, that a person can feel helpless and hopeless because of how they are treated earlier on in life, and then as adults they become paranoid because they're seeking to have a sense of control because of the high anxiety that they suffered earlier on in life.
So you said there's not really a clear cause for this. Is there treatment for this?
Well, it's a very difficult illness to treat. Number one is that when it comes to therapy, because these persons are not trustworthy, it's very hard to get them to see a therapist. You hear from the email that this wife suggested that the husband should do counseling, but he refused and say that she's the one with the problem, she's a pathological liar. You heard also that the pastor suggested that this person did counseling, but to date the person is not in counseling. So because people with paranoid personality disorder do not trust, it's very hard for them to get help. Often, in many cases, they do not come in for help until the spouse is on their way out the door, that they will say, okay, I'll go in. But even when they do come in for counseling, it's very hard for them to get help because they do not buy into the therapy, because they do not trust the counselor. And so it's very hard. However, having said that, with a skilled counselor who can learn to develop rapport over time with people who have paranoid personality disorder, there are some evidence that shows that in some cases the disease can be treated by therapy, by counseling. In terms of medication, there is no known medication that treats paranoid personality disorder in itself. However, medications that treat anxiety and depression are often used, because people who are paranoid, they often develop these other illnesses as well. They're anxious, they suffer from anxiety because they're paranoid, or they become depressed because they're convinced that their spouse is having an affair. But for the disorder itself, there is no known treatment. So when we talk about personality disorders, we are talking about illnesses that are very deeply rooted in a person, and so it's very difficult to treat because of that. And I see here that we are quickly come to the end of today's show, and so I wanted to just remind listeners that if you've just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio broadcast, and I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, and you've been listening to the other voice you've been hearing is that of Melissa Waggett, and we've been talking about this very difficult issue, Melissa, of paranoid personality disorder.
That's right. And if listeners are just tuning in and maybe missed the earlier parts of the show, they can always check us out on the CHR website and the Elim Counselling Ministry website, where our podcasts are posted, so you can get caught up on this really interesting topic that some people may be experiencing personally in their lives, and hopefully through listening to the show they can get some hope and some help.
Absolutely. And if you need more information on the topic, or if you need help, if you're going through a very difficult time, do not hesitate to get in touch with us by visiting our website and looking for our contact information. Our website is elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com, elimcounselingministry.com, and our telephone is 613-699-1677. Again, 613-699-1677. And until next time, we want to thank you very much for listening, and we pray that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.